Welcome, listeners, to a realm where shadows dance and whispers echo. I'm your host, Rick Clifton, and this is Quills and Chills, the podcast that brings you face to face with the masterminds behind the macabre. In each episode, we journey into the minds of horror writers and filmmakers to uncover the secrets lurking within their tales of terror. From classic tales to modern nightmares, we'll traverse the corridors of the human psyche and unravel the threads of dread that keep us turning the pages or sitting out there in the dark. Welcome to Quills and Chills. Hello, and welcome back to Quills and Chills. I'm your host, Rick Clifton, and today I am excited to welcome back Bijhan Agha, the incredibly talented trans Muslim American creator behind a thrilling new comic series, The Legendary X-Knights. This is the second comic that Bijhan has come to talk to me about. This story dives into an epic battle against vampire kind, led by a diverse team and powered by the strength of their emotions. So before we dive in to Bijhan's inspirations and creative journey, let's start with some fun insights behind the X-Knights creator. So Bijhan, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here.
So let's start with a question, because I already know the answer to this, and I never get tired of talking about our favorite superhero. But what are some of your favorite comics or graphic novels that inspired you to become a comic book creator?
Well, one of my most favorite superheroes of all time has got to be Wonder Woman. She's fantastic. And I honestly I strongly believe that the original Marston and Peter run should be taught in schools as fundamental literature, because it was instrumental in changing the public perception of Nazism. Because when they were being printed, there were plenty of American Nazis going to rallies, filling stadiums. And here was Wonder Woman saying that these were the enemies of America, living amongst us, living abroad, and trying to destroy the freedoms. And that totally changed the way people perceived fascism in the United States. And now it's a dirty word, like it should be. It wasn't when she started, and now it is. So I think that's because we had Superman fighting criminals, we had Batman fighting criminals, and Wonder Woman was the one that was out there fighting Nazis, and that was huge. So I think that's a really big one. Another huge one for me has always been Japanese tokusatsu in all sorts of forms. Now, so there's Sentai and Metal Hero, but we mostly know it in the West through the interpretations of Power Rangers. Because the way they make Power Rangers is they take a Japanese show where there's superheroes that go into full costume, and then they just chop out all the parts where you can see their faces, and they add American actors. So all the special effects and all of the martial arts are done by Japanese professionals. And once I found that out as an adult, I started going back into these Japanese tokusatsu. Tokusatsu means special effect. So you go into these special effect series, and Power Rangers is mostly made for children, but in Japan they had this idea that most Japanese households only had one TV, and they had one shared common space. So when someone wanted to watch something on TV, everyone else had to agree to it too. So a kids show wasn't able to only appeal to kids. It had to have something for the adults as well, or they would not agree to watch it. So when you go back into Super Sentai, you get these very intense themes of war and strife and change, and what does it mean to be an individual in a society that atomizes people. So I would say that as a kid, I really liked a lot of the really popular stuff. We got the Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, stuff like that. But now that I'm older, I'm going back and I'm really appreciating stuff that has been mostly overlooked. Wonder Woman got a couple of movies, but she's nowhere near the pop culture icon that Batman, Superman, Spider-Man are. And a lot of these Japanese science fiction series are almost completely unknown in the West, even though they have incredible literary merit. They have amazing costume designs. They have amazing special effects, just real artistry on display. And then I'd also have to say another big one is the Ninja Turtles, which are, when I was a kid, obviously I watched the cartoon, but it wasn't until I was a teenager and I was able to get my hands on the original comics that they really started going into the idea of, what does it mean to form a family unit in the face of oppression from every side? You not only are you marginalized by society doesn't even know you exist. There's no space for you in the world of humans, right? And those stories really resonated with me because the cartoon is very silly. It's very much focused on, golden age antics, the latest sci-fi concept of the day. But the comics were much more serious about who these people were and what their position in society was and how they interacted with other people on a regular basis. So those are the big three for me. Those are the Wonder Woman, the Japanese tokusatsu, sort of in general, and Ninja Turtles. Those are the ones that stick with me today.
This is why I love when you come and talk to me, because you always get so philosophical about comics, and it's not often that I can actually have that conversation with somebody, and I tend to agree. Once you really dive in to, we talked about this I think before, X-Men is another one for me, and sort of what they represent, in terms of, being an outcast from society or not being part of the norm, as it were. And those are always big ideas and big topics for me. So that's why I love you when you come and talk to me. It's great. So let's talk a little bit about the legendary X Knight, and tell me a little bit about how this idea sort of first came to you, and what was sort of your influence that sparked the story for you.
So one thing I was really talking about, how these tokusatsu shows from Japan, they really don't get a fair shake in the West. They're almost never translated. It's usually only fan subtitles, no commercial products at all, with a couple of exceptions, usually ones associated with Power Rangers. But there was this one Sentai series that I saw that was Sentai is Japanese for squadron. So it's about a team. And every year they come up with a new premise, new characters, new setting. And there's this one Sentai series, I believe it's from either 89 or 1990, and it's called Sentai Jetman. And I loved the premise. I wanted to do something really different with the premise, though. So with Sentai Jetman, the idea was that there was this incoming invasion of aliens, and the military had created this superpower that they could inject into people through radiation. And so they assembled the world's best soldiers. But then the aliens attacked before they could inject this power into the soldiers, and the powers were scattered across the earth and sent into random people. So the premise that I really wanted to capture was the idea that they now have to form a team to save the earth when they know nothing about each other and have no connection to each other at all. And that was the premise that I wanted to pluck out. So obviously I had to change a huge number of things to get it to fit my vision. So, for example, there's no alien invasion. It's not the military. There was never any chance of super soldiers. So instead, I wanted to tell a much more down to earth story, not as pie in the sky. Because with this one, with the Sentai, they have these giant interchanging robots, and they're fighting monsters the size of buildings. And I wanted to try and do something a little more grounded in the emotional reality of our present. So it's set just a few years in our future. And it's about people who live lives very much like our own, but they're forced to come together to try and save people from a threat that is secret. And that's something I really wanted to do, is because with Sentai Jetman, the idea was that this was a public war, and they became public figures as they became, as they were fighting these people. But I wanted to explore the idea of what is it like when you're holding on to all this trauma and all these experiences, and you can't share it with anyone except the people that you shared those experiences with. And I feel like that's a very common thing that happens in many different communities that experience trauma. You see it amongst soldiers, you see it amongst queer people, you see it amongst women who have been the victims of abuse. We have this thing. It's I think the nickname is trauma bonding, where once we've gone through something together, we become closer as people. And so that's what I wanted to focus in and double down on in this story, is the idea that these people had nothing to do with each other. And now just the bare threads of their humanity are what's going to tie them together so that they can accomplish something that will save the world.
So smart. I love it. It's just, I love the levels. It's really fantastic. Real quick, I just want to sort of set up, this is part of a bigger universe. Because the first time you came to talk to me, we were talking about the adventures of Cobra Olympus and the Time Wars. So if you could talk a little bit for me about sort of that universe and where this lives within that, or does it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It does. So Time Wars is a brand that I'm making. And the idea is that I really liked what things like Marvel and Star Wars were doing, especially in the early 90s, when I was a kid and I was, enjoying all this stuff. I really loved the idea that you could tell a story And then you could tell a totally different story, but there would be these threads connecting them, just like in real life, just, countries that are the same, and then technology that's the same, and cultural concepts. So I love the idea of these stories being interwoven to each other into one larger tapestry. Now, at the same time, I feel like both Marvel and Star Wars, which are the two best at this, sort of fumbled when I was a young adult. With Marvel, a main problem that happened is that there was a stronger and stronger emphasis on crossovers. And because there was a stronger and stronger emphasis on crossovers, there was a lower and lower emphasis on individual characters, which is what it was built on. The idea that the Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four coexist is fun, but it doesn't really add anything to the story of Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four. And now all of the narrative tension was being rested on all the interconnections, which were probably the least interesting part. And then with Star Wars, they just rebooted it. Before Disney, it was all one single contiguous story. And it may not have been perfect, but it was the single largest artistic endeavor ever undertaken by humans. Cross-generational, cross-class, cross-racial. And it was just this huge, humongous thing. And then they just rebooted it. And that completely killed the appeal of this big, expansive universe. So I wanted to do something where I learned those lessons, and I learned what I could from those. So Time Wars, as an idea, is that there's one simple premise. Humanity and vampire kind are and have always been interlocked in a battle to try and win history. The vampires want total conquest. The humans want total freedom. And they're sending time travelers back in time to try and manipulate history to get their preferred outcome. Now, with that, you have a huge, vast network of stories that you can tell. Anything from the Stone Age to the deep future. So Cobra Olympus was the first comic that I published in this series because I wanted it to be something really, again, grounded, right? We can accept more fantastical things once we've got our feet on the soil in terms of who people are, what they mean to each other, their position in society. So Cobra Olympus takes place in 2015, which is about when I was in my late 20s and having a great time and a little more fit than I am today. so it was sort of a specifically nostalgic time for me because it was a year before that horrible election. And so Cobra Olympus's adventures were meant to introduce readers to the idea of the Time Wars. She is someone who lives in the present day, but she keeps getting messages from the future telling her how to change the world around her, how to interact with it. And she gets technology from the future that allows her to do things that others couldn't. So she's our first little intro into the Time Wars universe, a normal human being from everyday life whose life is now being affected by messages from the future. And now we're going to go a little further with the X-Knights. Now they're being not just getting sent messages from the future, they're being sent powers. And so with the X-Knights, this takes place in our future. It takes place about 100 years from now. And so they're still recognizable to us as Americans, as queer people, as as women, men, non-binary people. We're not so far in the future that we now become unrecognizable, but it gives me a little space to make up some stuff about what's been going on in the world since. And with Legendary X-Knights, thank you. With Legendary X-Knights, the idea is that the Time Wars are escalating, right? They need more recruits for their activity in the present, and they need to give them more destructive powers because the vampires are also escalating. So the idea is that with the Legendary X-Knights, we're going to see it play out in the Time Wars that they have to engage in these large-scale battles, and then they can't tell people why they did it because it's a secret. So they're going to be getting it, not in the first issue, but we're planning this. They're going to have the brunt of public opinion forced upon them without full knowledge of the context. They can never provide context for what they're doing. So the idea with the Time Wars is that it provides this consistent explanation for why there's conflict between two different groups throughout all of history. We're also working on another comic that is going to take place in the Wild West. We're working on another comic that takes place in the deep future. So we're going to explore lots of different avenues with this. And it was also really important to me that the enemies were vampires. because when the enemies are humans, then we have to wonder about their motivations and why they're doing what they're doing. And humans can never be divorced from their society. So obviously we keep seeing this, especially with Batman, the idea that he's always beating up criminals and he's never addressing the root cause of crime. Whereas in the Time Wars, the enemies are vampires. They are not just misled humans. They're not humans with a mental problem. They're not humans who are suffering poverty. These are the rich. These are the powerful. These are the corrupt. And they don't want to spare us anything. They want to give us as much harm as possible to their benefit.
Well, let's talk about the X-Knights, shall we? I'd love to sort of talk through the cast of characters and their powers and how they get their powers. And you could just take us through that a little bit.
Sure. So the powers themselves are coming from an item that I invented for the Time Wars universe called an X Crystal. And now an X Crystal is technically an alien device. It's very ancient, from an alien civilization that no longer exists. But it was used to convert thoughts, feelings, and emotions into physical objects. And when
love that. So.
And when it bonds with a human, each one also has a specific color, and that color is associated with a particular spectrum of emotions. And so when a person is bonded with a crystal, it takes that spectrum of emotions and translates it into armor and weapons that they can then use to defeat their foes. And they also gain elemental powers. So we'll start with the leader of the group, Lily McGann. So Lily McGann, her father was from Ireland, her mother was from Hong Kong, but she was born and raised in the United States, so she considers herself an American first and foremost. She's in her 60s, and she's a retired Air Force colonel. And she has spent her entire life in service to a greater cause. Everything she's ever done has been to try and improve the conditions of people around her, and she's never had a moment to sit and focus on her own needs and her own wants. And that's why even when she's being dragged along onto this long, expansive, situation, this war, this new war that she has to fight, she's still just, strong. She's still just powerful. She doesn't sit and worry about what's going to happen to her. She's just focused on the mission. And so she is the red dragon. When the red crystal bonds with her, it allows her to take all her anger, all her frustration, all her rage at the system, and all the things that she feels about her own life, and translate them into armor, weapons, but also fire. She can create, summon, and control fire.
I think that would be me.
And then so the blue sea serpent is Rocky Anoa'i. And he's a Samoan prince. He's a trans man. He's a former professional longboarder, retired. He is in his 50s now. And he is an aggressively cheerful person. It's very hard to bring him down. And when he does get serious, you can feel the room change, because when he gets serious, it is really serious. So he's obviously capable of the full range of emotions. He just tends to stay on the cheerful side more often. So when he does get angry or frustrated or sad, people notice. It means something. So he's the one who is tasked with going around and gathering everyone up, which is sort of frustrating to him because he's on the Arrow Ace spectrum, and he's very accustomed to spending the vast majority of his time alone and having these very short bursts of planned social interactions, usually at the beach, usually around some sort of event. And so this idea of having prolonged, sustained contact with people that he doesn't know and doesn't really get along with is extremely draining for him. So he's trying really hard to stay cheerful while all this is happening. So for him, he gets the blue X crystal, and this allows him to summon armor and weapons as the blue sea serpent, but also gives him control over water. So he can summon, create, control water. And for him, the spectrum of emotion is fear. He has a lot of fear he's lost people to surfing. He's been excluded from his own society because of his gender identity. He's really afraid of what his life is going to become now that he has no time alone. And all of those fears and anxieties are what propel him to be a more powerful superhero. And then the last member of the team is Deshaun Oliver. And so Deshaun Oliver is non-binary, he, them. I love his hair. He's got this big poofy hair, and he has this big mustache. Yeah, I just love the way he ended up being. I did an okay job drawing the concept art, but when Swapnil, our artist, when he finally drew Deshaun, I was like, yes, that's me. That's the person. I really wanted to have body diversity. So Rocky is really big. Lily is really beefy. She's really muscular. And Deshaun is the skinny one. And so the idea is that he was the skinny black kid who was growing up in California, and he was always getting beaten up. So when he became an adolescent, he learned karate, and he's now become a black belt. And so his two ways of making money are he's a hairdresser during the day, and then at night he teaches karate lessons. And when the story starts, he really has no sense of self, no sense of purpose. You know, Deshaun, they don't know what they want to do with their life. They're really living in the moment. They just go to work, they do what's at work, and that's it. They have no hobbies, they have no aspirations. You know, Deshaun, he has no real plans for the future, no real connections to other people. So when Rocky comes along and tells Deshaun, hey, you can be the person. You can be the person that saves everyone. All these skills you've developed, the social skills from working with people's hair, the karate skills, all of these things you've been doing have been leading up to this moment where you can be the person you always dreamed you could be. All you have to do is give up everything you've known and give it everything you have. And so it's this huge thing where his whole life is going to change. Their life is going to be completely different. They have no idea what's going to happen, but the only thing they know is that it has to be better than what they have now. Because it has to be. Because what they have now is nothing. So yeah, so it was and then I gotta say is their power. They are the pink unicorn. Deshaun, I really
I love it.
one thing that's always frustrated with me about Super Sentai / Power Rangers, because they use the same character designs. They have had everyone be every color, every gender. So they've had a red lady and a red male Power Ranger. They've had a green lady and a green male Power Ranger. But the one things they haven't done, they've never had a female Black Ranger, and they've never had a male Pink Ranger. And so Deshaun is he, they, but Deshaun obviously prefers expressing themselves as more masculine than feminine. They have a feminine side, but prefers the masculine expression. And so the idea that Deshaun Oliver is going to be the pink unicorn X-Knight, right? That's what was really important to me. And so each color is also associated with an emotion. And for pink, it is insecurity. It's the idea that right. So it's all these feelings of I'm not enough, I'm not going to be enough, I'm not going to be good enough. And only when Deshaun focuses on those feelings, those feelings of inadequacy, is Deshaun the most powerful. It's only by truly allowing themselves to feel those feelings at their maximum power that Deshaun is able to control magnetism. And what we have to remember is that magnetism is just the electrons orbiting any given atom, and all atoms have electrons. So when Deshaun's at their most powerful, he can control anything. He can move anything because everything's slightly magnetic.
I think this is just so smart and so brilliant. The concept of emotional empowerment through physical manifestations. I love it. I think it's absolutely unique. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about, how you see this idea impacting the readers, and especially younger ones who are just now coming into discovering their own identities.
Yeah, it was really important to me that their powers flow from emotions that we typically associate with negativity. We often think of being angry as a bad thing, of being fearful as a bad thing, of being insecure as a bad thing. And I wanted to create a story where those feelings that we feel like we don't want to have are actually the things that give us the most power. Because when we think about things that have changed the world, really think like things where people have stood up and made a serious difference, they have all been fueled by anger. They've all been fueled by fear. They've all been fueled by insecurity. These are things that we feel so that we understand our relationship with the rest of the world. So I wanted these to be not sources of weakness. We shouldn't just be blissfully happy all the time, no matter what's happening around us. We need these emotions to react in real time to the wrongs around us. We need to be angry about injustice. We need to be fearful of the destruction of our society. We need to be insecure because we need to know that these things will not last unless we protect them. So the whole idea I wanted to bring forward was this idea that emotions that we typically run away from, that we typically try to shun or discourage in others, could actually be our greatest sources of strength and allow us and empower us to make a world that's better.
I love it. I can't even tell you how much I love this concept. It is really quite brilliant, and I love what you're leaning into, and you know the way you're leaning into it. I think the next question is going to be a little bit. We've got to be mindful. I'm going to be mindful of spoilers, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the type of missions that are going on, or maybe the better question is there a particular scene or moment that you're looking forward to? And again, without spoilers, if you could sort of tease that up for us a little bit.
So one thing I really wanted to focus on was martial arts, because I love martial arts. That's one of the main reasons I watch live action kids shows, is because they often have the most amazing stunt work. If I go back and watch, original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, I'm not watching it for the story or the characters, because it's basically a medieval morality play. They're going to learn a little lesson at the end. They're all going to go through their emotions. What I'm watching for is, one, the amazing jobs they do for the costumes and the sets, and two, the other one that blows me away every time is the martial arts. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to organize a comic book that showed off what the human body can do. So I went through and I watched all these different martial arts movies, kung fu movies from the 70s. I watched, the modern Korean action films. I went through and I tried to find the action and battle poses that were the most interesting, not just a roundhouse kick. Like, what about like a hook kick, like things like, I just really wanted to find the most. So those were the things that I wanted to inject into the story. So when they are battling this vampiric conspiracy, there's a vampiric conspiracy that's going to try and take over the world. And when they're battling the enemies, I wanted it to be a visual feast. I wanted it to be a spectacle. So what we did is we worked really hard to make sure that they're not only showing off their powers in ways that are cool and interesting, but that they each have specific battle tactics. For example, Rocky almost never kicks except in forward kicks, because he's a little top heavy and he's not great at maintaining his balance. Whereas Deshaun kicks all the time because he's lanky and he's skinny and he can control his body balance a lot better. So we wanted to give a lot of personality and a lot of character to the way that they fight. And the missions they'll be going on, like you said, there's a little bit of spoiler territory, but I will say that it will involve dismantling a subsection of the military industrial complex.
I love it. And it actually reminds me, as a kid myself, I think one of the things I used to love in TV shows and cartoons growing up were acrobats. Like anytime there was any kind of acrobatic activity, and that actually inspired me as a kid to sort of go out and to learn, acrobats and how to do flips and back flips and forward flips and things like that. So I don't know that I could do one today if I needed to, but as a kid I certainly did that a lot. So
I think there's something to be said about with CGI, we're often losing the spectacle of what a human body can achieve. I think that's something that I want to see more of in cinema and television. Is I want to see just pushing the limits of what a human body can do, because we are amazing creatures and we are capable of so much. And I love seeing a brilliant athlete or performer or martial artist just showing off what amazing animals we are. We're phenomenal. So I really love that. And it's also, you brought up acrobatics, dancing, acrobatics, gymnastics, martial arts. They all sort of blend together in the entertainment industry. You need someone who knows how to throw a punch to know what a punch looks like, but you need a choreographer so that you can plan everything so no one actually gets hurt. So even in shows like Sentai and Power Rangers, they have someone on staff who is a dance professional to make sure that when they choreograph things, everything goes smoothly, everyone knows their steps, nobody gets hurt, so it's not, and it's very famously in the original Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, only one of the main actors was a martial artist professionally. There were 2 dancers and 2 gymnasts. And it's because they were used to learning the moves and knowing the choreography, and they were strong, powerful. They could throw a kick or a punch. It was just another dance move to them.
I used to have a friend who taught fight choreography on set, and he used to just regale us for hours about stories about trying to get people to move the right way so they don't get hurt. And
Right.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's like a dance. So
yeah.
So tell us, how can our audience find this project, support this project? When is it coming? Give us all the details about your Kickstarter that's coming up.
Yeah, so we're doing a Kickstarter, and it's going to be, the idea is that we're trying to do a limited run of comics. We're not trying to make an infinite number. We want to make 100 comics, and if 100 comics have been pledged, we're not going to take any more pledges. So we really want to do something fun, a limited run, something collectible, something where the physical version really matters to people. So you'll be able to get a digital comic for $1, be able to get a physical comic for $6, and then we have lots of cool, fun add-ons from there, including video comics. We've got stickers, we've got T-shirts, so you can pick and choose whatever you like to express yourself with these characters. And so it's a Kickstarter. We'll have the link in the description. It's going on now. It started on December 1st, and it's going to be going on through the end of January. And yeah, we've already done 2 Kickstarters before. They all went smoothly. Everyone got their what they pledged for. The money was all evenly distributed, and we had no hiccups. So we don't expect any problems this time. If there are problems, we're working with a company with a very long-standing reputation for making things work with both on printing comics and as well as fulfilling Kickstarters. So if there are any problems, I'm very confident we'll be able to sort them out very quickly.
Well, I can say I supported the last one. Your communication through the Kickstarter was top notch. I mean, probably
Thank
better
you.
than some of the other films that I've supported in the past. So I've got to say kudos to that. And I would say big thumbs up, and I will absolutely support this one as well. So
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I just really want to make stuff that people enjoy. If I was just wanting to make money, I'd be managing a hedge fund somewhere. It's just not what I want to do. What I really want to do is I want to make stuff that people can enjoy and that will bring something meaningful to their lives. So that's what I really want to do.
well, mission accomplished as far as I'm concerned. I'm enjoying it, and I enjoy you. I love every time you come and talk to me. So
Oh, thank you.
I most definitely want you to come back for the next project. And again, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time on Quills and Chills. Bye. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Quills and Chills. I hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the mysterious and the haunted. If you're enjoying the show, don't forget to support us by subscribing on your preferred podcast platform and leaving us a rating or review, because your feedback helps keep those chills running down both our spines. And feel free to share the show with your favorite fellow horror enthusiasts. Also, if you guys have any spooky stories, strange encounters, or paranormal experiences of your own, I'd love to hear them. Reach out to me on social media or email me at quillsandchillspodcast@gmail.com. Who knows? Your story might end up on a very special episode. Anyway, thanks for listening, and I will see you back here next time on Quills and Chills. Bye, y'all.